We've got a massive edition of NBL Now brought to you by Code Sports, your number one for NBL coverage. Right here now, it's Melbourne Cup Day. It's Tuesday. We've got plenty to talk about and recap from the weekend of hoops. But let's get into our guest. I'm Kelsey, Browne, your host today. And my guest is a four-time first NBL team member, Mark Worthington, all the way from Perth. Mark, anything planned for Melbourne Cup today?
I am going to a function today. I have spent all my monies and I am already broke. I feel like I'm not expecting much for today, but it's always a great day. And I remember living in Melbourne quite fondly. There is nothing quite like being at the Cup for your first time. And I hope so many punters get that chance today.
It's an exciting time to be in Melbourne, but what was an exciting time was the game last night. Cup Eve, we had Sydney Kings taking on Melbourne United. Melbourne United, they've lost their streak. They are now 9-1. I know you have some thoughts on this game. Can you give me some early insights into what you thought about that Kings win?
First off, what a great weekend it was for the Sydney Kings, and not only the beatdown on the Brisbane Bullets, but then to do it against Melbourne in Melbourne. I thought it was a great sign that they're moving in the right direction as a team. And it comes off the back of another aggressive performance by Xavier Cooks, who was under fire coming into this weekend, and a lot being said about his play and all that. Peeling back the curtain a little bit, I was the one that helped, was scouted Xavier to go to Washington. And in that MVP season, he was super aggressive in all his movements. He started the offense with his transition. And we saw that in both games on the weekend, that he came out uber aggressive. He was looking for his shot. And I think all that does for this Sydney Kings team is opens up the floor to allow the Kendrick Davises to be able to have more space to operate, because he becomes a threat towards the rim. When he's not a threat, then the court begins to shrink a little bit. But it's not all doom and gloom for Melbourne United either. I know this is the first game that they lost. They lose by 3 points. And when you look at the end result, Kendrick Davis goes for 34. Bull Quall goes for 17, shooting a perfect 5 from 5 from the field and 6 from 6 for 17 points. And Matthew Dellavedova knocks down 4 threes, which he hadn't been able to do all season. And so for United, you shake their hand, you go, this is a learning point. Maybe this is the catalyst, and I don't want to be a knee-jerk reaction here, but for Chris Goulding to come back into the starting lineup now. But it's definitely not doom and gloom. It was a fantastic game of basketball, and one that I think any basketball fan could sit back and enjoy last night, because it was just so much back and forth along the way.
You make a great point, because in one of the huddles, Chris Goulding said, we have had a terrible game and we are still within reach, which says a lot about Melbourne United's identity. Do you think the Sydney Kings went away and had a conversation about their game plan? Because it looks like a very different Sydney Kings, just the way they're rolling it out. Matthew Dellavedova isn't getting as many looks because those looks are going to Xavier Cooks. Do you think they went away, and is this... We don't know what happens in Clubland, but do they sit down and have this conversation and say this is a turning point after that Tassie game?
I don't know. I think knowing Gorge, it's just the process and the way that he goes about his business. Everything is not for the now, but it is for finals basketball and what they can do in finals. Obviously, they needed to tinker where they were currently at, and the inconsistency of the Kings basketball. You have that great performance against Adelaide, and then they drop to the Cairns Taipans. Like, along the way, they needed to find some sort of consistency. Now, we've seen Matthew Dellavedova take less shots. I think he took his opportunities last night. By the way, disappointing that the Melbourne crowd booed Delly last night, which is another point that we can raise. But I thought he was really controlled in the way that he did. I thought Bull Quall, that was arguably his probably best game as a Kings player, and they need him to be able to knock down shots. But it all starts with, for me, the aggression of Xavier Cooks and getting him into the game early, because it does open up all the other avenues for different players.
It's interesting that you say that, because in the presser, Brian Goorjian gave an explanation as to why Bull Quall has maybe been behind in the first sort of 6 weeks of the season. So if anyone wants to go and listen to that, go and check out Gorge's comments on Bull Qual. It was really insightful. Moving on to other things around the league, there has been a little bit of push and shove between players, between the media. There seems to be a bit of intensity around that at the moment. We've seen Bryce come out a few times and most recently and notably come at Damon Lowry. What are your thoughts around this argy-bargy? Is it good for the league? Is it too sensitive? Where are we sitting with all of this and how do you view it?
It's an interesting topic. For me, I think it's good for the game to have a little bit back and forth because it's a talking point. But the reality of the situation is the NBL brings in past players like myself, Damon, Chris Anstey, to bring our opinions on what we see. The reality of the situation is within the four walls of a club, they're the opinions that matter the most. And clubs ultimately have the idea of where they're heading for the finals in the future without really anyone outside of that, let's call it a bubble, understanding of what's going on inside their club. The fact that Damon has his opinions and strong opinions at that are there as content. Content for the NBL, content for the people that tune into these podcasts and have a listen because they want to get some sort of insight of how we think about the game. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. It is very much the same. Now, what I do like is that we're not going down the bland AFL standard response of let's take it one day at a time and yada, yada, yada. There has always been personality that comes with basketball, and it's because there's more of an Americanized background to basketball than what there is in AFL. So we can have our opinions, we can give our thoughts on players, clubs, etc. Ultimately, for Bryce in particular, if he's going to go on credential, the only person he could listen to is Andrew Gaze, would be the only person that he would take advice from of where things are at. But it's funny, I remember as a past player, when ex-players went into the media, we were always a little bit disappointed when players were maybe a little bit critical of a player or of a team because you still feel like there should be that bond between players. The reality of the situation is you might have a connection to a club per se, but you don't have a connection to the broader NBL. And when you're asked for your opinion on certain matters or teams or whatever, it is just that. It's just an opinion. So I don't mind it. I understand it. I think it's good for the league to have the banter back and forth. I'm glad that we're not a sterilized AFL media responses. But yeah, I think it's all good.
It is the game within the game, and I think it is the understanding piece that there has to be this talk. And the one thing that I think the audience and our fans at the NBL, they love is this chat. So I don't know, I think it is good for the league and potentially it's interesting to see all of the personalities coming out and how people handle some of these things. But as an ex-player and stuff like that, I think just the understanding piece of why is important. Moving on to South East Melbourne Phoenix. Now, I think at the start of the season, no one really had them up there. They thought they recruited poorly. They thought potentially their import choices weren't great. And maybe early on, we weren't seeing what Josh King had in mind. Now we are. Now South East Melbourne have come to the party. They're second on the ladder. For you, have you seen enough to see them up there with the likes of Melbourne?
I think I was a doubter of South East Melbourne. I didn't think they would make the finals this year, and they've proven me wrong to this point. Their defense was never a question. I knew that they would have a defensive identity. My question was always around the offensive end. That being said, the teams that they've beaten and when they've beaten them hasn't shattered the like, I'm not amazed by it. beaten Cairns twice, beaten Sydney, as we've already spoken about, the inconsistency of the Sydney Kings team throughout the early parts of this season. You've beaten New Zealand. You've also lost to New Zealand. You've beaten Illawarra and I believe it was Brisbane as well. You have lost to Melbourne United twice. You have lost to Adelaide. So they currently sit, for me, in a top 4 setting, but not quite a top 2 setting. I still think they're ways away with that. They have surprised me offensively, but this is coming off the back of what has been a great start to the season for Nathan Sobey and his consistency of what numbers he's been able to put up. Is he able to do that consistently for the rest of the season? And can they get more of a scoring punch that is just a continuous at the moment? It seems to be Owen Foxwell one game and then Angus Glover the next game. Who is going to be that second and third guy that will step up continuously and regularly throughout the rest of the season? That's my biggest question with South East Melbourne.
And they've got a challenge on Thursday night. They come up against Tasmania. Tazzy coming off that strange loss to Cairns, I will say. But they face South East Melbourne. If we know anything about Scott Roth, he'll have a plan. He'll want to bounce back. He doesn't like losing. How are you viewing this matchup, Tassie, South East Melbourne, this early on?
Yeah, Tassie's definitely going through it at the moment. There's definitely the Will Magnay question that hangs over their head because he's such a vital piece and injuries have played such a huge part of his career to date. And when he's been healthy, Tasmania have typically been within a fighting chance of being able to beat him. The bigger question for me is TJ Starks and what we've seen out of him so far. He's been brought in as an injury replacement player. The first game he plays, he's outstanding. Really played limited minutes since then and opportunities, and it's that balance for Scott Roth of keeping his regular rotation going for when Johnson finally comes back in and keeps the team moving, or trying to steal a few wins. Maybe his thinking is because he stole a few more wins than he expected on the road earlier on, that he was able to play more of his core roster for long-term gain. So to me, Tassie's got their back against the wall against South East Melbourne. That being said, Scott Roth will have a defensive plan for trying to stop Nathan Sobey. So it'll be interesting to see what Josh King can do in response to that. It's going to be a defensive slugfest, I would imagine. But it'll be a good game nonetheless.
We know the rings aren't friendly at the Silverdome anyway, so it could be an interestingly low affair with scoring. You talk about Josh King. I've mentioned Scott Roth. Just a quick one, maybe just a quick one-worder. Who's leading for Coach of the Year at the moment?
Dean Vickerman. That's a true word, sorry.
We love it. I mean, it's hard to go past someone who started the season with 9 straight wins. Let's talk about the Ignite Cup game coming up tomorrow night. We've got the Hawks taking on Melbourne United. It's great for Melbourne United. They get to turn around and play 2 days later and turn around what was a loss. What does this look like for the Hawks? Because the Hawks, it's really hard to encapsulate what their season has looked like. They go to Adelaide, they turn up. Yes, they walk away with a loss, but it is a much improved game that they stepped out with.
Well, much improved from the game during the week when they got blown out by 40-odd points. The Hawks, it doesn't get any easier for them. If Melbourne United had found a way to win last night, I would say that they'd have a fighting chance against Illawarra tomorrow. The fact that Melbourne United lost won't sit well with Dean Vickerman nor the club, and I would imagine they'll go in there. The matchup between McGee and Edwards is going to be fascinating. Edwards has been so good to start this season. JaVale McGee, we obviously know where he stands within the NBL currently. That matchup alone is worth the price of admission in my eyes, what they're going to do. And it's so great to see Davo Hickey back. Got his feet underneath him under the first game. I thought he was terrific in Adelaide in that second game. His two-way versatility, both on the offensive and defensive end, was outstanding. I think he had 3 blocks in the first quarter of that game against Adelaide, and just shown his maturity and how much he's grown as a player over the past 2 to 3 years has been incredible. So really happy to see him back in that matchup. Like I said, I'd expect Chris Goulding to come back into the lineup. He was really good to start the game against the Kings. Knowing Bubbles, he'll go back out there, and I'm sure that he'll have about 6 or 7 3-point attempts by the end of halftime. So I'd expect Melbourne United to get back on the wagon here and have a win against the Hawks. And it's not all doom and gloom for the Hawks. I think we started to see a turnaround in form in that Adelaide game, but it needs to happen sooner rather than later, because at 2-7, if it starts to slide any further than this, then they're in real troubles of missing the finals.
Last one from me, and this comes from Moments That Mattered. Derek Rucker said that in that Adelaide game, Hawks should have gone through Davo Hickey a lot more towards the end. It ended up going back through Tyler Harvey. What are your thoughts on where Hawks need to play? We talk about the Sydney Kings going through Xavier Cooks more. Does Davo Hickey need to be more of a focal point?
I don't know if it needs to be Davo specifically. I'd like to see more movement from the Hawks in general. So where their best moments this year have come off a lot of ball movement and working for someone to get a really good shot. Their worst moments this year have been really stagnant. Someone's just holding the ball, whether it's JaVale, just an easy post up. I have Joey Wright ringing in my head with JaVale of if Joey Wright was coaching JaVale McGee, and he would say, go bury your opponent underneath the ring and we'll get you the ball and just go dunk it on him. I haven't seen, because he's getting the ball outside of the post a lot, and it's a lot of stagnant motion. They should be moving him through a UCLA cut, a cross screen, something where he's going to get the ball right next to the basket, because once he's there, he's impossible to stop with what he's able to do. So for me, I don't know if it's Davo. I don't know if it's Tyler Harvey. All I'd like to see through the Hawks is more ball movement in general to work to get a great shot. And they've got so many good options still on this team. This is a 2-7 team with a Tyler Harvey. This is a 2-7 team with a JaVale McGee, with a Davo Hickey. Whoever's playing best on the night probably deserves the ball, but I'd really like to see more deep catches from JaVale, because that is an NBL cheat code.
It's so interesting that you say that. I had this conversation. I don't understand how someone like JaVale McGee comes and is a part of a team that just cannot find a way to win. It seems unfathomable to me, but we'll see it play out for the rest of the season. As always, Mark Worthington, thank you so much for your time joining us. We love your insights. Enjoy your Melbourne Cup event. And for those of you listening, we've got plenty more NBL Now coming throughout the week. You can head to codesports.com.au for all your basketball coverage. Like I said, they cover NBL like no one else. Enjoy Melbourne Cup, everyone, and we'll speak to you soon.